Very good morning, Alex here with you, and in the studio with me, a very special guest, a legend in Melbourne radio, and I speak of Dan Webb.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. Now, 3DB, I suppose, is where it all began with you, but I'd like to know, and I know my listeners would like to know, how you got to 3DB, the family station.
Well, I was working with Radio Australia as a scriptwriter.
Oh, yes.
And I used to play assistant producer to, what was his name? He was a famous pianist, but he used to produce little dramas about Australia, which were broadcast overseas.
Oh, yes.
And
like little vignettes or something, short stories.
Yeah, Wood was his name.
Oh, right.
Wood, yeah. But anyway, I used to carry the records up for him and play assistant producer. And Patricia Kennedy was there in one of these dramas, and she came over to me and she said, "Oh my word, we do look glum this morning." And I said, "Well, I hate this place." and she said, "I've come over to tell you quietly that Jeff Raymond has just resigned from 3DB. Why don't you apply for an audition?" So Jeff Raymond went to Singapore.
That's right.
To start a station for the BBC. And I went, I applied for an audition.
So you hightailed it to...
I wrote a letter, and Eric Pearce was the chief announcer at the time.
He would have been, yes.
And tell me about yourself, dear boy. So I went on and on and on. And do you know, this struck me, and it does still strike me as most unusual. Eric Welsh came in at that moment, just as Eric Pearce was about to tell me that I've got the job. And he said, "Take Danny up to the Children's Hospital and show him what we're all about." And with that, Eric Welsh just took me up to Carlton. In those days, the Children's Hospital was in the St Nicholas building.
Oh, yes. Yes,
And,
before they moved, and of course moved subsequently again.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was a shock to me because the Nicholas building was so packed with cases. There had been a polio epidemic.
Right.
Remember?
Yes.
And they took over the American Quonset huts from the Camp Pell.
Oh, yes.
When the Americans moved out.
At Royal Park.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they moved some of those Quonset huts into the grounds of St Nicholas building.
Good heavens.
And all these poor little kids were there, suffering from polio and with no air conditioning, and the Quonset huts get very, very hot.
Very hot indeed.
Yeah.
Dan, what year would we be talking there? In the 50s?
Yes. 1948.
48.
Yes.
48. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you've had the interview and you've gone and saw what they do with the Royal Children's Hospital, which is still, of course, a wonderful appeal that they run every Good Friday. What a legacy that is for them. What were you doing? What was your first job? What did you have to do in your role at 3DB? What was the first job?
Well, I think they saw me as a replacement for Jeff Raymond, who was one of the best newsreaders that we've ever had. And I used to sit there with Maury Kellard breathing down my neck, trying to read the news, and stuttering and stumbling, and I was really in disgrace because I was so bad. And they said to me, "Look, you need to settle down and get with the family, and we'll put you on 3LK." every day from 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock was when the news ended.
That's right.
The midday news, and then they crossed to 3LK. It was 1 o'clock until 2.
Yes, right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. 3DB Melbourne, 3LK Central Victoria, the Herald Sun stations. That's the call signs.
That's right. And 3LK was at Lubeck, the transmitter.
That's right.
Harold Boast was the engineer in charge there.
Was he really?
Yeah.
That's always a trick question, LK. What did the LK stand for? You know, not a lot of people knew.
Yeah. Do you know what 3DB stood for?
Drewley Business College.
Oh, have you read that somewhere?
Oh, yes. Well, as I say, I've got a book on 3DB, and I've got the 3DB story, which we've run, and it brings back so many memories of the stars of yesteryear, you know, going way back.
Yes.
But they were originally the Drewley Business College, were they not in Swanston Street? Was it in is that Nicholas building? What was that building they were originally on the top floor of? I think it's in Swanston Street.
I don't know anything
That's
about
where
them.
they were granted. This man got the license, and then he sold it on to the bloke from
Keith Murdoch.
Keith Murdoch. And then Keith said to the first manager, Dave Worrell, "You better see I bought this license. You better see what you can do with it." And of course, out of that came 3DB.
And Keith Murdoch, excuse me interrupting, but Keith Murdoch was offered a license or a chance to put in for a license.
Yep.
And he said, no, we're a newspaper organisation. We don't want...
He didn't want to know anything about it.
No. When he saw what money 3AW and 3XY were making, he was in for his chop.
He was indeed.
A lovely fellow.
I believe he was a very nice
Oh,
man.
he set the standard for the Herald. Yes, a great man.
This we're talking about.
Keith Murdoch.
Yeah, that's right. Times have changed, of course, with all these things. But the manager at 3DB, he was a great man too, I believe.
Oh, yes, Dave Worrell.
Yeah.
Dave Worrell got the managership of 3DB because he had been a great success running the Herald Learn to Swim campaign.
Oh, really?
Didn't you know that?
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. Dave Worrell came back from World War One, and he was given the Herald Learn to Swim campaign to manage. Yeah. And he made a huge success of it. And it was partly due to his wife, Zoe, but Dave was a very, very good manager.
He was.
Yeah.
He was, by all accounts.
3DB owed its success to Dave Worrell.
I heard that, I don't know whether the story is true, but I think it might be, there was another great manager at UZ, and that was Lewis Bennett.
Yes.
And when Dave passed away, Lewis said, thank goodness for that. He said, now I can be number one. So that was the status that he put Dave up on this pedestal that he aspired to reach. Yeah. It's wonderful. Tell me, who were some of the great personalities of DB when you were there? Some of the names that we'd know. You know, you mentioned Eric Welsh already.
Oh, you tempt me. I've got. Can I?
Yes.
I made notes because I met somebody talking to when I was talking to a Probus Club, and they came from Bairnsdale.
Oh yes.
And they said to me, "Did you know that Dick Cranbourne came from Bairnsdale?"
He did.
And I said, "No, I didn't know that." And so I've got these notes. You stop me if I'm getting boring.
No.
But his father was German, and his name wasn't Cranbourne at all. It was Cranborg.
That's right.
And when the First World War broke out, the people who had been to the Bairnsdale dances, where Mr. Cranborg ran the orchestra, they boycotted the dances. And with the result that, they were in disgrace. So somebody said, well, look, why don't you just change your name? And he changed his name to Cranbourne.
Yes, and a lot did.
Yes.
A lot of people did for that particular reason.
That's right, and people swarmed back to Bairnsdale Town Hall every Saturday night because they had a family orchestra. But as this person told me, they forgot that the sons were named Rudolph, Herman, and Bismarck, and and the daughter was Wilhelmina.
Funny story.
So, but they were marvellous. And Dick Cranbourne was too young to go to the First World War. He played violin, and he played cornet in the town band. But when the First World War finished, he felt that there was a better place to live, and he came up to Melbourne.
Right.
And he failed as a waiter, he failed as a plumber, he failed as an iron moulder. He joined Jack Holt's racing stables to become a jockey, and
Because he was only small, wasn't he?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, and and Jack Holt one day came on, patted him on the head, and gave him £5 and said, "Put that on number 3 in the last race, because you're too heavy to be a jockey." So Dick put the bet on, and he won. And he won enough money to buy himself a saxophone. So he went and had lessons on the saxophone.
Yeah.
And then he did a course in hairdressing in Chapel Street and opened a barber's shop. And then he used to play at night time with Jimmy Davidson's ABC Dance Orchestra.
When they would have been at the Palais, I imagine, playing down there.
Charlie Ward was sussing out the talent, and came back and reported to Dave Worrell, "Look, this bloke can play the saxophone, he can sing, and he can do everything." And
So that's how he got, obviously, to 3DB. Well, Charlie Ward, that was a name, and Ren Miller.
yeah. Well, Charlie Ward and Ren Miller were Zoe's choice. When Dave was scratching his head and saying, how on earth am I going to get this radio station off the ground? And she took him to the Tivoli and said, those are the two blokes that'll...
And it worked a charm.
Yes.
They were brilliant, weren't they?
They started the Smile
Smile Away Club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you got a Smile Away Club going here?
No, we haven't. But perhaps something we should think about.
Yeah. Well,
Because that was the thing about radio stations back in those days. I think of Chatterbox Corner on 3AW for the kids, the Smile Away Club on DB, and there were others, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, the idea that there was no ratings system. No one could tell how many. And Dave's constant worry was how many people are listening to the station. You couldn't tell.
No.
So Charlie Ward and Ren Miller invented the Smile Away Club. And you know, at one stage there were 47,000 members of the Smile Away Club, including the Prime Minister of Australia,
That's huge.
Joe Lyons.
Oh, my God. That's wonderful. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, all right, who else has we got? Dick Cranbourne. Well, tell us a little bit about Eric Welsh, because I know there's a wonderful connection.
Well, Eric Welsh was called in because the early test broadcasts were so dismal.
That's right. The short wave and all of it.
Charlie Ward used to, because they were waiting for telegrams to come in.
That's right.
Charlie Ward used to entertain when it was raining, and nobody could stop him once he got going. So they said, we need an expert. And they got Eric from the Argus, and he originally started in Sydney, but he was working for the Argus, and they brought him. And Eric Welsh. Eric Welsh was a genius.
Now, didn't he was he the one that had the photographic memory? He could look
Yes.
at something.
Oh yes.
And virtually read it line for line or repeat it back?
Yes, and he knew about racehorses. He knew all the breeding of racehorses. He was a wonderful man.
What was that program? Was it Information?
Information, please. That's right.
Yeah.
You've got a good memory. John Stewart used to chair that.
That's right.
John Stewart was another talented fellow.
Yeah. Of course, he was very talented because he was the daddy in Daddy and Paddy, was he not?
That's right. He wrote the script for Daddy and Paddy.
I didn't know
and
that.
Played Daddy to Pat McLean.
McLean.
Yeah.
But I didn't know he wrote the script.
Yes. Yes, he did.
Heavens. What a
Yes.
talent. What a talent.
A wonderful man. And compared Information, please. Mm-hmm. And you've heard about his going to the ABC and asking for an audition.
No.
Oh,
do tell.
Well, he worked for J.C. Williamson's.
All right.
He was on the stage.
Yes.
And he thought radio was going to end the
Stage,
theatre.
like this.
Yeah. So he went to the ABC. Could he have an audition?
Uh-huh.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Stewart, we don't have auditions here. Come around about 7 o'clock tonight, and we'll get you to read the rainfall figures for the Wimmera and the Mallee. So he went back, 7 o'clock, and that is the end of the news from the ABC, and somebody handed him a sheet of paper, and he started, here are the rainfall figures for the Wimmera and the Mallee. And Horsham had 25 inches, Warwick Nabil had 30 inches, Rapanyup had 40 inches, and somebody said, that should be points, not inches. He said, oh God, I flooded the bloody country. Yeah. And Dave Worrell happened to be listening to the ABC News, and he thought, that's the fellow I want. And he became Daybreak Dan.
Daybreak Dan. That's right. And that was that breakfast program?
Yes, he was on that for 25 years.
25 years.
And I took over from
You did.
John.
Yes.
John got corns on his vocal cords,
Oh.
went to the doctor, and the doctor said, see if you can stop talking for about a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so John retired with a bottle of scotch.
They tell me he liked to drink.
Yes, he did. Oh, I love to drink. But he whispered to me one day, I've seen Dave Worrell. I've told him you're taking over the breakfast session while I'm silenced. and so Dave just went along with that.
And did he come back or did you stay there?
Oh, no, he came back.
He came back.
Yes,
So
but
you did it for a period of time. And
I did it for a while. But John Eden, of course, took it over and lasted as long.
time. Silver
Yeah.
Fox.
Yes.
I listened to John Eden's breakfast program all of the time.
Did you?
Just
Yeah.
loved John Eden. I thought he was wonderful. And the interaction between him and Jeff McComas.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that started with Ernie Sigley, you know. Ernie was brought in when they called for choir boys on the cricket. If rain stopped play and the team was over in England, there was a dead silence, or there would have been a dead silence if they hadn't called for these people. They used to call for anything you could hear, cuckoo clocks, and people used to carry their cuckoo clocks on the tram, or they did once. And there were bassoon players, violin players, imitators, all anything that you could listen to. They what haven't we had? Says Jock McLaughlin, and Dick Cramben said, we haven't had choir boys. Oh, choir boys! Any choir boys out there? And all these snotty-nosed little kids jumped on the tram and came clattering into, because nobody had cars in those days.
That's right.
No.
Public transport.
And they queued up, and Ernie was so popular. He sang "Love Is a Golden Ring." I
That's
think.
right, he did. That was, I think, was his first recording.
Yeah, was it?
I think it was. I know I've often spoken to Bill Armstrong about that.
Yeah.
So because I think Bill was the technician on that. He's been around a long time as well.
Oh, he has.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ernie came in. He started as a turntable boy, didn't he?
He started as a turntable. He was my turntable boy.
Was he?
And he used to play the most dreadful pranks on McComas. Maury Kellard, who had been the early morning newsreader, married. And he went up to live at Yala Waipura near Ararat. And Jeff McComas came in, and I suspect Jeff McComas went to a coach who said, try and get a bit more emphasis in what you're saying when you read the news. Use your hands a bit, So he used to wave his hands around a lot when he came. And the Herald used to provide 1 tin of ginger nuts to last a week in the studio. And Ernie saw this tin of ginger nuts and plopped a ginger nut into into McComas's hand every time he waved his hand. So he finished up with a stack of 26 ginger nuts, I think was a record.
What a funny story.
And it was a turntable boy's duty to go in while the newsreader was on and fill up the kettle and make him a cup of tea when he finished the news. So Ernie did this, and he used to come back, stand on a stool in the corner of the studio where we had one of those tin rubbish bins, and he used to hold a kettle up as high as he could and dribble the water into this tin waste paper basket. and McComas had to fight, to stop himself.
Stop from breaking up.
Yeah.
What a wonderful story. I remember going as a teenager, one Saturday night, my mate and I had always been interested in radio. In fact, we had our own little studio at home.
Yeah.
And so we said, let's drop into 3DB. We'd been to see a Beatles film, I think it was Hard Day's Night or something, and we popped into the Flinders Street studios, and there was a chappie downstairs cutting the trots on. Remember that room had with all the lathes and that? I think his name was Keith somebody or other, but hell of a nice man. And we said, can we go upstairs? And David Johnson was doing the Saturday evening program. Remember David? And he used the little intercom and he said, there's a couple of lads down here who'd like to come up and see you. And he said, send them up. So we went up there and we had a lovely time with David Johnson. But I was amazed by this huge desk that they had in this big studio.
Oh, 16-inch.
The 16-inch turntables. And there was a bank of roller tape recorders on the top.
Yeah.
Because at that stage, I think I don't know whether they might have had cartridge machines for the ads. I don't know. But, it was all still pretty much radio as it used to be.
Well, that was Ernie's job in the breakfast session. He had 4 turntables, and he used to have to line up these recorded ads.
That's right, on little 45s. Yes, I've got a heap of those at home. And the announcer's desk was over to the side, as I recall.
Yes.
And David couldn't have been nice. He said, where have you been, boys? And he talked about us and we told him about the Beatles film and all that sort of stuff. So it's a lasting memory. And it was at that meeting when we left, Keith, who was this engineer downstairs cutting the trots and all that, he said, I want you to have these. And I'd asked him if I could get a copy of the news theme and the sports theme.
Oh, really?
And he gave me a copy from the recording department. I've still got those and I treasure them. So it's just a wonderful memory.
What was the name of the theme?
Heart of Oak.
Heart of Oak, that's right, yes. Played by the Royal Marines.
That's right, the band of the Royal Marines. And their conductor at the time was Vivian Dunn. And he later became Sir Vivian Dunn. On the occasion of Robert Farnham's 75th birthday, I was in London and I met Paddy Dunn, his son.
Oh, really?
And I told him the story about how his dad's recording on 3DB was used as a news theme for so many years. And he was...
Yeah. Talking about the... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. You go.
Talking about the turntables.
Yeah.
I was, as a young, just new boy at 3DB, I was standing waiting for a tram to clatter into the city because I didn't have a car. And... this huge blue, sky blue Chevrolet pulled up, and a lady leaned over and wound down the window. And she said, "Are you looking for a lift to the studio, dear boy?" And I said, "Oh, Miss Dest."
Stephanie Dest. Oh, now there's a name.
Yeah. And Stephanie Dest opened the door, and she drove into the city. We went through the Punt Road, Toorak Road crossing against the lights and lived. You could in those days.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It does not
And then
surprise me.
we did that hook turn into Flinders Street, and she couldn't park the car.
She never could, I believe.
No. She used to run in and call out for Jeff Cork.
That's right. Park the car. I am running late.
Yeah, and Jeff Cork used to go around the city about 25 times pretending to look for a park, just thrilled to be driving this car. Yeah. But what I was going to tell you was she clattered upstairs, and she used to do a talk, a beauty talk, and I was sitting where I am, and Stephanie Dest was over there where you are, and she cocked her leg up on the seat, and started fiddling with the top of her stocking, and I didn't know where to look or what to say, and Bruce Ross Smith was the turntable boy, and he was playing her theme, Totem Tom Tom. Yeah, oh, you've got a marvellous memory.
From Rosemary.
Yes, it went on and on and on, and I thought I sort of trying to catch her eye, saying the theme is playing, and are you ready to go? And she just ignored me, and she leaned over and she said, "Would you have a threepenny bit, dear boy?" And I thought she wanted to make a phone call, but my wife told me later that she wanted her suspender had gone. And she wanted to fix her suspender. So when she got that fixed, she sat down and she went on.
How wonderful.
Oh, she was a character.
Now, okay, so we're at 3DB. What? When did you left there?
Oh yes, I had to resign, and it was a great deal that went on. But I'd been reading books about television. It doesn't matter. And I applied when I heard that Keith Cairns was being made the general manager of HSV7.
Did you know Keith, or had you known him? Or?
No, I didn't. Well, I knew of him because he was the journalist that the Herald sent over to India when India was partitioned.
Oh, yes.
And I'd been in India during the war, flying, and so I knew what a dangerous job he'd had. And it was agreed that only one journalist from Australia would go to India for the partitioning. And poor old Keith had a terrible time over there.
Goodness.
Because there were riots. We had been flying over Calcutta at 200-300 feet to count the bodies that were lying in the streets.
Good heavens.
When I was in the Air Force. And so I was not long out of the Air Force. I was, that was 18 months before. So I knew Keith Cairns a little bit. And he gave me but television was a great disappointment to me.
You told me that when we originally spoke about that, and I just wondered why that was to you.
Oh, well, I was lucky that when the war in Europe finished, our squadron's job was to take all the expats from Hong Kong, Singapore, Saigon, Thailand, back to Calcutta to be flown back to England.
Oh, yes.
Because the four-engined aircraft that they sent had sunk through the concrete in some of the strips that they'd gone to.
Good heavens.
And nobody wanted to land at Hong Kong because you had to go over the mountains and cut your engines and really...
Yeah, it was pretty scary there.
Oh, it was very scary. Very, very scary. So I was asked to sign on for 2 years after the war, and that was what I was doing. So I knew that Keith had had a really hard time, and but my great friend at the Herald was Dennis Warner, who was a foreign correspondent. He knew Cambodia, he knew Laos, he knew it was Indochina as Vietnam in those days.
Yes, yes.
And so Dennis Warner and I talked about the programs that we were going to go. And actual fact, we wrote to Prince Sihanouk. Do you remember Prince Sihanouk?
Yes, indeed.
At Cambodia, and asked him if would he actually host the program that we did on Cambodia, and he agreed to do that.
Oh, wonderful.
But and we thought we were going to get film crews and the money to make these documentaries. We never got any of it. It was a great disappointment.
So when did you actually move into TV? What was the year? Was it
1956.
56.
I was there for the opening night.
Wow.
November the 4th.
Because that was the Olympic Games sort of spurred that on? Was that?
Well, the Olympics Games came after the opening of the television stations.
Yes. So they sort of, I think they accelerated a little bit so that there would be TV.
Yes. Oh, yes. And I have to say that Alf Potter, who I'd worked with at 3DB, was a wonderful director to work for.
He made the transition to television too.
Oh, yes. He was brilliant. In fact, for 2 years before television started, we used to go to the showgrounds and do ghost televisions.
Rehearsals type things,
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I didn't realise they did that. I've actually seen, there was when the old Seven Studios in Dorcas Street and all that disappeared, there was a whole range of programs or DVDs made, and I've actually been privy to seeing one of those. It was just wonderful memories.
Yeah, Graham Foster made those.
That's right, just wonderful memories. And it sort of takes you back because, there's Happy Hammond with the hat and
Bill Collins. There was a talent. Oh, an amazing talent.
The accurate one.
He was the one when Eric Welsh... Eric told me, and I think I can tell you, that he applied 9 years in a row for a rise at 3DB. He was a top race broadcaster in Australia.
Yes.
But the Herald was so mean, they knocked him back. And he maintained that Dave Worrell had all his letters in the bottom drawer of his desk. He
never passed them on.
No.
Now, when he gave away the race broadcasting, did he recommend Bill, or was Bill just there?
No. Bill came up from Gippsland. He'd been minding his
3GR or something.
No,
he wasn't on the air out there.
I don't think he was on the air.
Oh, okay.
He'd been sitting up a tree, calling the country races in an imaginary microphone.
Right.
But he arrived, and everybody was saying, "Oh, nobody will ever replace Eric Welsh," but Bill Collins was probably better. Yeah.
In the scheme of things.
Yes, he was, because he was so confident in his calls, and he knew so much about horses. And
he did.
So,
But Dan, he was talented too. I mean, he could
Oh,
turn
yeah.
his hand to anything. Singing, comparing the likes of Sunny Side Up.
So that's right. Oh, he was brilliant, and he was a brilliant race caller too. And when he arrived at 3DB to see Eric Welsh, Ron and I were going down to the City and Overseas Club. We used to do that for a beer and a pie, and have a frame of snooker. And I said, "That's where we're going to Bill. And would you like to join us?" "Oh, I'll come with you." So I said, "Do you know anything about snooker? Do you played snooker?" "Oh, at it," he said. and Ron and I used to just have a frame of snooker, but because there were three of us, Ron broke, and I never got a shot because Bill sank every red and every colour. I've never seen that ever before.
I think he might have been having you on.
He'd been minding his uncle's billiard saloon in Moe, I think.
He was probably hustling, I'd say, by the sound of it. It was Minnesota Fats all over again.
Yeah.
How wonderful. What a story.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I know his wife, Robin.
Oh, yes,
She's
yes.
lovely
Oh,
lady.
yes, a wonderful
And when I was at another place, Southern FM I was at, and she and Bob Horsfall, who works here,
Oh, yes.
on Wednesday afternoon, they did the Monday mornings with Rob and Bob, and that was hilarious. She's the funniest lady.
Yes.
Dear,
Yeah.
oh dear, oh dear.
Oh, and she can dance too.
She can. She's still in those ads on television. You see them from time to time.
Yeah.
She's wonderful, wonderful. They're great memories.
Yeah.
So what was your... I know television was disappointing. You were doing Video Village?
Well, the management at Channel 7 seemed to think that all the good television came from Australia on black and white film, and that we were only good for game shows. I started with Fun with Charades.
Oh, yes.
I had That's What's My Line. Shirley Cecil used to be on the panel.
Cecil.
She died a little while ago. Shirley was a great friend of ours. And, Video Village. And,
Was that Liz Harris? Liz Harris?
yeah, Liz Harris. Yeah, and Chris Christensen was the town crier.
That's right.
Yeah.
Chris, he'd been at 3UZ, I think,
Oh, he was a talented.
and he was a zither player.
Yeah.
And his sister, Peg Christensen, or Margaret, was a great actress.
Oh, yes,
She
of course
did a
she
lot
was.
of radio serials and things. I've interviewed her. She's passed away since, but
Yeah.
lovely,
Yeah.
very talented family.
Chris went over to London
So I believe.
and used to have boomerang throwing in Hyde Park. Yeah. And he used to draw huge crowds because they'd never seen a boomerang before.
Bob Horsfall tells me a very funny story with him and Chris Christensen. They were doing, do you remember a drink called Revella?
Yes, I do.
Well, they had to record, they were up at BEA Studios in, I think it's Hardware Street, and they had to record this Revella ad, and they wanted a yodel with an echo, but they didn't have a proper echo chamber.
Yeah.
So they put a microphone in the toilet down the hall with a speaker, and then they did yodeling hoo-hoo and recorded the echo. Even Chris Christensen. Oh, my goodness. What a funny story. But
Well-
they were great days, weren't they? They were just great days.
Well,
back in,
they got better with television, and I had 14 years covering state politics.
yes,
You know,
I remember.
when
See
in the
you
days of Henry Bolte.
Henry Bolte and Sir Arthur Raylar.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could still see you now on the steps of Parliament doing a report into the camera.
Yeah. Yes.
Did you enjoy that?
Oh, yes, I did.
Reporting.
I loved that. Yes, because I had my something to get my teeth into, you know. And Peter Ross Edwards was very, very kind to me. When I went up there, I didn't know anything at all about politics, and Bolty, Bolty was a funny guy. We used to go up to Bamgani when there was a Bolty state election, and he was returned over and over again. Yeah, Danny. He used to say, Danny, you be Prime Minister for Supply. You look after the beer. And I used to have to pour beer into the press fellas.
He loved his beer and he loved his smokes, didn't he? Dear. But he was an absolute legend.
Yes,
Legend. I mean, a lot of people didn't like him, but there was those that did. Obviously, he was returned many, many times.
Yeah. Can I tell you a funny story?
Indeed.
About the chairman of the Herald? The Herald was terribly mean, and that was one of the problems with Channel 7. They were so mean. And when Keith Cairns retired, I did an interview with him about being boss of a television station, and he complained then in a bleak way that the Herald board was so tough and mean, and they wouldn't come up with any of the money that they needed.
Amazing.
But they actually had an agreement. Norm Spencer and Graham Kennedy had an agreement that Graham Kennedy would come over to Channel 7. The Herald knocked it back too much.
Too much money.
But I wanted to tell you about the chairman of the Herald, who used to go over the people who were... Ernie Sigley was the example. This boy is getting too much in talent payments. Put him on the staff. Give him 15 shillings a week. Yes. And then he had a down on husband and wife teams working in the Herald. There'll be no more husband and wife teams working for the Herald. And so Dave Worrell had to sack
his wife,
Martha
Gardner,
who was known as Martha Gardner.
Oh,
and he gave her the chop, and she went to 3AW.
That's right, she did.
And she was paid 3 times as much.
And was quite the success, I must say.
Oh, she was a huge success. She was a wonderful woman. And when Dave knew that his retirement was coming up, he bought a lemon orchard out at Cat Jump Road in Templestowe.
Oh, yes, I remember.
He was going to retire out there, and he told Zoe that he'd bought this place, and she said, I'm not going out there. Oh, what about all my friends? They won't know where it is. Templestowe.
I can just imagine.
Yeah.
Because they would have been living probably Toorak or South Yarra or somewhere like that.
She lived in Toorak, and she dined out almost every day. Yeah,
she would have been with the Sheila Scotter crowd
who
just recently passed on.
Very, very so. Yes. But anyway, he said to her, I've got other plans for you, my love, and you're going to do the gardening session. And she said, not under the name of Mrs. Worrell. He said, no, you're going to be Martha Gardner. And she said, I don't know the first thing about gardens. So the first morning she had to do this session, she was leaving the house, and there was Fred the gardener squirting her aphids. The Daphne had aphids on it. Uh-huh. And what are you doing, Fred? And he said, Fred, I'm squirting your squirting your Daphne with aphids because they've got aphids on them. And what are you spraying? Cleansel, ma'am. Where do you get Cleansel? Do you make it up? No, you go to the chemist and you're the hardware store and you buy Cleansel. Yeah. So half an hour later, she's in there for the first time introduced as Martha Gardner. Now, ladies, I know you've got aphids on your Daphne, and I want you to spray, go to the hardware shop and get a bottle of Cleansel and squirt them. So she became Martha Gardner.
All came about.
She was a lovely, lovely lady. She,
You're right.
okay. When Kate and I got engaged, she invited Kate to lunch for a woman's lunch. And during lunch, she asked Kate, "Where are you going for your honeymoon?" And Kate said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I could tell you that. She said, "Well, Dave and I have got a little house in Portsea, and we've decided that our wedding present to you will be the use of our Portsea home for 3 weeks for your honeymoon." Now, where else would you find that today?
Yeah.
The boss.
I think that's wonderful. It's a lovely story.
It is.
It is a lovely story.
Yeah, she was a very good woman.
Dan, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but what are you doing now? What occupies your time?
Oh, I'm writing a biography of William Marriott, Buffalo Bill Marriott.
Oh.
He was up at the... Do you ever go to the chalet at...
No.
Oh,
But it
never.
sounds fascinating, yeah.
Oh, well, Bill Marriott was the leading character up at the Buffalo Chalet.
Mm-hmm.
He used to take all the walks. He was the guy who carved out the cricket ground where staff and guests used to play every Sunday.
All right.
And, he was a wonderful, wonderful man. Born in Fermoy, a member of the King's Own Royal 8th Irish Hussars. I think I've got that
In the right order. It doesn't matter. But that sounds as if it'll be good reading.
Yeah, well, I've been in touch with Fermoy in County Cork, where Bill was born.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that I get some help from the locals.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, I want to thank you so much, Dan. It's been an absolute joy talking with you, reminiscing about the old days and times past. But I think that's wonderful, and I wish you all the very best and good luck with your writing.
Thank you, Alex, very much. And I'm staggered that your memory is so good.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Dan. It's fascinating.